All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're connecting the dots on a story that, honestly, is almost too wild to believe. It's this tangled web that pulls together Silicon Valley, Hollywood, and, yeah, global intelligence. We're going to expose what looks like a hidden architecture of power.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start with the big picture idea. Then we're going to look at each of the key players one by one. And this is where it gets crazy, we're going to reveal the deep intelligence ties that seem to connect everything.
Okay, so the absolute heart of this whole thing is one powerful and kind of terrifying idea. The worlds of big tech money, global entertainment, and state intelligence, they're not separate anymore. Not even close. What we're seeing is this structural merge of private influence and state power, and it's created a completely new way that the world is run.
To even begin to understand this network, you have to start at the center of the web, the man who is the ultimate broker of power and access, Jeffrey Epstein.
You know, everyone thinks of Epstein as a financier, but that wasn't really his main job. His real role was being a connector. Think of him as a master networker, a network intermediary. He was the bridge between tech billionaires, world leaders, and Hollywood A-listers. He made it possible for information, for money, for favors to flow between these worlds in a way that just couldn't happen otherwise. So this brings us to a really key concept called accountability capture. I mean, it's basically how these elite networks protect their own. They create this bubble where members are shielded from the kind of legal and social trouble that you or I would face. This is so important for understanding how someone like Epstein could stay so powerful, even after he was convicted back in 2008. And just look at this timeline. It shows how deeply plugged in he was. He wasn't just throwing parties, he was a strategic piece of the puzzle. I mean, look at 2014. He hosted dinner where tech mogul Peter Thiel and a former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, are literally discussing targeted killing operations. Then a couple of years later, he's connecting that same tech mogul to future Trump fundraisers. This is the direct fusion of Silicon Valley money with state-level military strategy. It's wild. And that leads us perfectly to the first major piece of this machine, the technocrat Peter Thiel. He's the guy who connects all that venture capital cash straight into the intelligence web. So, this wasn't just some casual friendship. It was a serious financial partnership. We're talking $40 million. That's the amount Epstein invested into one of Thiel's venture capital firms. This was a deep, deep business relationship.
And that trust, it definitely went both ways. In emails that have come out, you can see Epstein giving Thiel advice on how to protect his insane fortune from, federal crackdowns. He's literally suggesting ways to tweak his tax regime. That shows a level of trust and intimacy that is way beyond a simple investment.
Now, Thiel's biggest influence is obviously his company Palantir, and where it came from is, well, it's pretty revealing. Palantir was basically born from the U.S. intelligence community. It was launched with $2 million in seed money from a company called In-Q-Tel, which is, get this, the CIA's very own venture capital firm. And this table right here shows you exactly what Palantir does. It's not just some software company. It's an engine for state power. Its Gotham platform sifts through massive amounts of data for spy agencies. And then there's its AI platform, which uses AI to literally generate battle plans and target lists for military commanders. It turns data into actionable and often deadly intelligence. Thiel himself doesn't even hide it. When he was asked about the ethics of Palantir's tech being used in military missions by the Israeli Ministry of Defense, he just brushed it off. He said, and I quote, "My bias is to defer to Israel." End of story. Okay, so let's shift gears. We're going to pivot from tech and intelligence over to Hollywood, a whole other world of cultural power and influence. And this is where we find the film director Brett Ratner, yet another node in this insane web. So here's the thing that's just impossible to ignore. Ratner has publicly, repeatedly denied ever knowing Jeffrey Epstein. But then the Department of Justice released photos that clearly show him inside Epstein's New York townhouse. The contradiction is right there in black and white. So after his entire career in the U.S. basically collapses because of all of these sexual misconduct allegations, Ratner pulls off this incredible geopolitical move. He gets super close with the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and then, in 2023, he just immigrates to Israel. He gets a safe haven, plus a ton of tax breaks and other perks. Okay, so now let's look at what seems to be a parallel system of power and protection, but this time in the music and culture world, the case of Sean Diddy Combs. I mean, the federal case against Combs revealed this just deeply disturbing pattern of abuse and control. The allegations claim he was leading a criminal enterprise for more than a decade. The trial got into these coerced sexual performances they called freak-offs, and the whole thing has been described as a pop culture case study in human trafficking that was propped up by corporate power. All right, now we're going to pull the lens all the way back. Let's look at the deepest layer here, the history that connects these modern networks to clandestine intelligence operations that go back decades.
This comparison is pretty stunning. Back in the 80s, you had guys like Robert Maxwell and a much younger Jeffrey Epstein who were allegedly using shady banks to set up actual arms deals. Fast forward to today, and you have Peter Thiel's Palantir providing algorithmic weapons. So the tools have changed. We've gone from missiles to data. But the goal of influencing state power, it's exactly the same.
And this brings us to probably one of the most chilling quotes in this entire story. The prosecutor who gave Epstein that ridiculous sweetheart deal back in 2008, Alexander Acosta, he allegedly told his team that Epstein was, quote, above his pay grade, and that he, quote, belonged to intelligence. It basically suggests that his value to spy agencies put him completely beyond the reach of the justice system.
You know, when you lay it all out like this, the architecture just becomes crystal clear. It really is a sophisticated system. You've got each of these figures representing a different lane of influence: tech, finance, Hollywood, entertainment, and they all seem to connect right back to sovereign and intelligence power. So what are you supposed to take away from all this? I think what we're really seeing here is this fundamental blurring of the lines. It's not about separate spheres of influence anymore. It's about a fully integrated system where private power and state power have pretty much become the same thing. And ultimately, all of this forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question. In a world where these private networks can wield the power of a country, where they can use private tech to make life or death decisions and private connections to get immunity, who is actually left to hold them accountable? This has been another Way to Real disaster.